Boom. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Shall we get started then?
Sure.
All right. Thanks for joining us this late afternoon, early evening, depending on your perspective and depending on where you're viewing this from. My name is David DeWitt. You've already met Ann Evans. Our other colleague is Annie Murphy. Annie and I are both associate directors of admission here at Center College. And we're going to talk for a little while about primarily the college application essay, but we're going to talk a little bit about some other elements of the application, the common application in particular, to kind of give you an overview of what we're looking for and what it's like when people in an admission office are actually reviewing your application. So I think that should be sufficient for introductions.
Great.
All right.
Just another tip as you watch the presentation, we're going to do a screen share. If you just want to focus on the faces of those folks who will be talking, if you go to any of the boxes and you click at the top where there are 3 little blue dots and you click on hide non-video participants, then that will kind of minimize your screen so you can see everybody a little bit better. So.
And I also failed to mention that there is a chat function down at the bottom of the screen. And we'll present for a little while, but then we want to make sure we're addressing any particular questions or concerns that you might have. So we'll probably try to save those for the most part until we get done. But if a question comes to mind and you want to go on and pop it in the chat box, please do.
Great. I will share my screen. Here we go, and we will get started. I'll go in presentation mode. All right.
All right. Well, so welcome everybody. We've titled this Rite of Passage, pun intended, on that. I think the college essay is one of those things that is really a piece of the application process that some folks find intimidating, maybe a little confounding, but we actually think it's the best part of the application. But so we'll get into it in a little bit. Anne, if you'll click on to the next slide. One of the things I think it's really important to consider is that your essay is important, yes. It's also part of a larger whole. During your college application, the information that you provide for us really does help give us a holistic sense of who you are. So we just wanted to make sure that you realize that not all of the weight is on this essay. There are also some great things we're going to learn about you on other places of the application.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at an application, which we have time to spend with each and every single student's application to Center, which is one of the advantages of being a liberal arts school, but we are looking holistically. So we're looking at everything someone submits through their common application. That includes the rigor of the coursework that a student is taking based on what's available at their high school. That includes their GPA. We're also looking at extracurricular and leadership commitments. We're also looking at any part-time jobs that a student might have. We want to be sure you include that. I mentioned we're looking within the context of the school for the rigor of coursework, but that also applies to the types of opportunities by way of clubs and things like that that you might have the chance to get involved in. We are looking closely at recommendation letters that students submit, test scores if students choose to submit those. We are now a test optional school, at least for the next 3 years. And so you can choose whether or not you want to submit your ACT or SAT scores. And the way we're moving forward with those is if they benefit you, we will incorporate them. If you submit them and they don't benefit you, then we will not incorporate them. But they're a piece of the puzzle as well. We're also looking at kind of our different institutional goals. And then, of course, your essay is a big part of that holistic process as well.
And as you agonize over crafting your essay, your application essay, you may be wondering, well, does it really matter? Does anybody read these things anyway? Is it going to make any difference? Yes, we do read these. We read them very carefully. And probably the most fun piece of the application for us as we review them, because it's the most personal part of the application. So any college that tells you they're doing a holistic review of students, they are absolutely reading your essay. Real people are sitting down to take time. Often more than one person will be reading that college essay and making some notes on it. The way we evaluate them is we simply read them. Colleges typically will have some sort of rubric, and they will score the application in one way or another. As has already been alluded to, it's a relatively small piece of the puzzle, but it can be a really impactful and important piece of the puzzle. Can a good essay really make a difference? It absolutely can. In a lot of cases, the essay tends to reinforce what the rest of the application tells us, right? A student who's taken good challenging courses and has gotten good grades, may have impressive test scores, probably is going to write a pretty good essay as well. The essay, I think, has its most impact when it tells us something we don't already know, or in some ways maybe contradicts what the rest of the application tells us. So if a student has struggled academically for a term, a semester, a year, or perhaps throughout their career, but if they can put together a really compelling essay, that can make us reconsider how we looked at their grades otherwise. So it can have a really good impact. A bad essay or a not so good essay obviously can affect things in another way. Most often, I think a not so good essay is a lazy essay, or that's the reason it's not very good. I think it's most of the students we're evaluating, I think, are capable of writing a pretty good essay, but sometimes they'll get a little lazy, a little sloppy, and that's something you want to avoid.
So, we mentioned how your essay is one piece of the puzzle. I also think that as a person who has read applications for a number of years, I wanted to give you guys kind of a peek behind the curtain as far as what it is that we look at when you talk about your extracurriculars or your activities. So this is actually just a screenshot of a student's common application. That is the application form that Center accepts, as well as 800 plus other colleges and universities around the country. So some of the things you'll notice here is that this is a student, like, for example, house captain. Every school, it seems like they do their student government differently. So sometimes you might say, hey, I'm president of student council, and maybe that's a really, really big deal at your school. Maybe it's not so much. So the idea is to help give us a little bit of context. So this student lists house captain, for example, and then she says, my school splits students up into 5 houses, Harry Potter style. And so she's, a captain of this house. So all of a sudden, we have a much easier way to understand the importance of that commitment and kind of what that responsibility was. So this is an example of a student who really used this writing in a good way to really kind of help us get to know her well. And I will contrast that to this next student who really just kind of listed things more like you might see on a resume. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with this. It's just kind of a missed opportunity. It would be really great to see a little bit more about, okay, this is a student who participated in, even if it's something for only, say, 1 year, what did they do? Was there a responsibility they had? Were they, and what kind of involvement did they have in that activity? So help us out when you kind of describe those activities so we have a better sense of what you're really up to. So, thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so what about supplemental or optional questions? So different colleges and universities, they have the opportunity to add extra questions to the Common Application that are specific to their institution. So I know at Center, we really love to see when students respond in a thoughtful way in this section. And we like to see them taking the opportunity to really kind of show us, hey, I've done my research on Center. I think it would be a good fit for me. And here's why I'm truly interested in applying to Center. So you can see that this student is kind of talking about a number of different things from our Center term course offerings that we have, which is our January semester that's about 3 weeks long, to saying, you know, Center is small and friendly, and I witnessed that on my tour. You know, I want to be surrounded by people who push me, encourage me, and support me through my 4 years. So they're giving us really, again, just this sense that they are genuinely interested, and that always leaves a positive impression. They're not required. I mean, it's not gonna hurt you if you don't fill out the optional or supplemental questions, but it certainly, again, it's just a nice indication to us that, hey, my interest is pretty sincere and deep, and I really hope to get in. So yeah, we like to see your response there.
So, so getting a little bit more into the essay itself. So this is one thing that I think is important to consider. You know, you have a whole gamut of choices, of topics, of experiences that you might talk about in your essay, but it's important to think about the audience. So the audience are going to be someone involved in college admission. That person may be an alum of the institution, they may not. It may be a person who is much closer to your age. It might be a person who has been in this profession for many, many years and is and is a little bit older. It could be somebody who shares your political points of view, or maybe someone who doesn't. So just thinking about kind of topics to choose and who it is that you're speaking to, you do have to think about a pretty general, broad audience for your essay.
And some things to consider. What is a successful college application essay to look like to us, those of us who've reviewed lots of them? That essay should round out your story. It should tell us something about you. And we've just sort of looked at some of the other pieces of the college application. You don't need in your essay to list all the different activities you've been involved with. We just seen there's a section specifically for that. I heard a high school counselor recently had a phrase for the practice of using your essay to essentially list your resume, and they called it an SMA. That's really not what we're looking for, because we have that information someplace else. You may want to focus on a particular activity that is especially meaningful or impactful to you and flesh that out for us. A successful essay is going to show the admission committee how you would contribute to the life of our campus potentially. What are you going to bring to our school? It could be your sense of humor. It could be the things you're most passionate about. It could be the things you have particular expertise in, things you're really good at, opinions that you have that you feel strongly about. Those are all things that we want to know as we get to know you as an individual. A really good college essay will tell us things that we're not going to learn from the rest of your application. Again, don't just list the courses that you've taken or the extracurricular involvements that you have. But if you can reveal something about you as an individual, that's really the most important thing I think the essay can do for us. You want to make sure that the essay is written in your own voice. It is a very good idea for you to have someone else to proofread your essay, whether that's a parent, a teacher, someone you trust who is good with language. It's good to have another set of eyes. When you proofread things yourself, you're likely to read what you intended to say rather than what you actually wrote down. So have someone look at it cold, and then if something looks odd, to point that out to you. But you don't want to have too many people to review your essay. If you have a committee of people, you have 4 or 5 different people offering advice and suggestions, it becomes an essay by committee, and it won't end up sounding like the thing you wanted to say, and we're not going to hear you as we read it. And then sort of the minimum bar for the application essay is simply to show us that you can put together words and sentences competently. So it needs to be a solidly written piece of writing. It doesn't have to be the most earth-shaking piece of philosophy we've ever read, but it has to be coherent. You have to have good grammar and usage. I mean, those things do matter for sure.
And so some of the things that it might be better if you don't do, or that you might kind of avoid. The first thing is, David kind of already touched on this, but the notion of kind of regurgitating or just giving us your resume all over again, your activities list. We've already got it. It's better to use that space to tell us something more narrative, something a little bit more interesting about you. Don't just kind of take the shortcut and submit an academic essay, something that you've already done from class. We usually know, we can usually tell that it just fits, it reads a little off. So, you know, this is, we'd like to see something different. Another thing is to try to take on a topic that's too big. You don't have a whole lot of space in your application essay. You're probably not going to be able to figure out world peace or global warming or social injustice in 500 to 650 words. So might focus on something a little smaller. Try to kind of avoid kind of the cliche metaphors, phrases, you know, make sure it's in your voice. And that kind of leads to that notion of kind of trying to kind of pepper up your essay with too many words that are, you know, you're just kind of looking it up in the thesaurus, right? It doesn't necessarily read as your word. It feels just a little bit too doctored. I would try to avoid that. Again, yeah, trying to be someone that you aren't. And it's also best if you don't kind of forego a trusted proofreader or reader, as David alluded to earlier. This is, although the content that you write about might feel private, it might feel very special to you, it is important to make sure that you've let somebody else take a look and weigh in.
And can I jump in for just a second too?
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight, I think the biggest overall mistake students make in trying to put together their college essay is that sometimes they try too hard. And the chief ways they do that are 2 of the things listed here. They'll go crazy with using a thesaurus, or they try to modify every noun and verb that's in there. They're trying so hard to make a good impression that they end up using words and phrases that they're not really comfortable with, and it shows through when you read it. And then trying to be someone you're not, or, you know, again, in an effort to make, I've got to make this great impression. You will be impressive enough. So just be yourself.
Perfect. And then there are a handful of topics that we read about a lot. You are certainly welcome to still write about one of these things, but it does make it a little bit tougher to stand out if you end up landing if you end up deciding to write about one of these things. So we get a lot of sports essays. We get a lot of students who tell us about how playing their sport has shaped them into the person that they are today. I'm pretty sure I wrote one of these when I was in high school, so I totally get it. But we read a lot of them. So if you do decide to write on that, try to really make sure that it feels super unique. We also get a lot of essays about mission trips experiences and things that students have done, and how those experiences have impacted them. We get a lot of quotes that kind of kick off the beginning of an essay. So so and so once said da 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 da, and now I'm going to build on this for my next 500 words. Or the dictionary defines resilience as, or whatever that thing is as, dot dot dot. We read sometimes about hardships that really are not big hardships. So it's kind of like they know that something popular to write about, it does fall under the category of hardships, but they've struggled to identify one in their own life. And so they kind of are trying to build one and weave the story that shows that this was a hardship.
Self-awareness is a very valuable
Yeah,
commodity.
I'll weigh in on that one just really quick. And again, the notion, so for example, it was a student who talked about the biggest obstacle she'd ever had to overcome. That was the prompt. And and her essay was about how her parents had given her a brand new car for her 16th birthday, but when she went to go take her driver's test, she failed it the first time, so she had to wait 30 days to drive the brand new car that she was given. So again, you know, that's wonderful, but when you think about the context of all the other essays that we might be reading, that doesn't necessarily come off great. So
Yeah, thank you for that example, Amy. Yeah. And then we're predicting that we will probably appropriately get a lot of essays related to quarantine and COVID-19. And again, all of these can certainly still be things that you write about, but we just want you to know that we get a lot of them. And so if you choose to write about something that falls in one of these topics, we just want you to try to work really intentionally to make sure that what you're telling us is unique and that you think it'll really stand out.
If it doesn't feel like a really personal story to you, then you probably want to look for a different topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So this is one of my, we're going to kind of get into a couple of kind of tips or hacks. So again, you know, most prompts, it's 500 to 650 words, right? So it's a short amount of space that you're working with. So one of the tactics that I think can be really successful is when a student, as opposed to trying to tell us a big story, they zoom in. They zoom in on one specific item that means a lot to them, or a specific memory, or one relationship, or one day or kind of moment that was really impactful, maybe one teacher. And then oftentimes the way that you include details and the way you describe that smaller event can often tell us more about who you are, your perspective, than trying to kind of be too comprehensive in that essay. So here's an example, the openers. Okay, we've put together a sample of these. I'm sure you can find what's going to fit into what bucket here. But here's a great opener. The first one there, living life unapologetically is easier said than done. And I should know, as I fail myself daily by means of one personal flaw I have spent years trying to correct. I say sorry too much. So here's a student who was really reflective, really thinking about something, you know, kind of a flaw she sees in herself, or just, you know, giving us a little bit of insight into the way she thinks. And this was a really compelling essay. You end up learning a lot about her. She was really humanized through that essay. Another example, the one in orange there, or the middle one, after years of searching, I've come to the conclusion the meaning of life is to work hard and find happiness. So I commend the student who is, say, 17 years old and who has discovered the meaning of life, and to tell us about it in 500 to 500 words seems a little ambitious, so it's a little challenging there. And then, of course, the other one, you know, hi, this is my name. I'm writing this essay so I can get into college. You can tell which of those three openers is probably the most compelling, which one might grab you the best. So then the notion of getting started. This is hard. this is the tough stuff. I always think that if a grown-up in your life is giving you kind of grief for not having gotten started on your college essay yet, you should ask them to write a really important personal narrative of 500 words and see how they how they do with that challenge, because it's not easy stuff. So one of the things that we have, you can go ahead right now and check out all the essay topics or the prompts that you will have for the Common App. They are available. We'll put it in the chat. I think the chat will pop up once we get off of screen share, I think. Possibly, or we'll just click on it for you. But you can go ahead, you can just Google that and find those topics. You know, just do some brainstorming. One kind of prompt that I think is really helpful, there's this beautiful poem by George Ella Lyons. It's called Where I'm From. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do that. It's a wonderful example of the way she has reflected on small individual details and how those have kind of accumulated to kind of make her who she is. And I just think it's a great kind of inspirational starting off point. So yeah, do some self-inventorying, kind of really think about things that matter to you. How have you gotten to where you are now? What are the things that you value? What are those things that you're most proud of about yourself? And then, you know, do some writing. Just don't edit yourself, do some freeform stuff. And try to have some fun with it too. You'll probably have a few drafts, that's okay. Hopefully if you kind of look at it as an exercise in self-exploration and self-expression, maybe it can be a little bit more fun.
And I have attempted to put those links in the chat box. I'm not certain I have done so successfully.
Okay. That's okay. So that pretty much closes it up for us today, guys. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that a little bit of this kind of will be helpful for you. If you have any questions, we would, if we take it off the share, we would be very happy to take any questions if you've got them.
And I'll ask our presenters here if there's any, we were actually working off a presentation that Annie has done multiple times, which I think is pretty comprehensive. But Anne, can you think of any, a question you would ask if you were seeing this presentation for the first time?
Ooh.
Yeah, curveball. I didn't tell her I was going to ask her that.
One thing that comes to my mind is just an additional piece of advice would be to go ahead and get started early. And as you're drafting, you know, your essay, it's okay to switch topics. If you decide, and you've written multiple drafts of one thing, and you decide, you know what, I think that maybe I really want to write about this other thing that I thought of the other day, it's okay to do that. Write about something that excites you and that you think you'll most enjoy. Yeah. For sure. And I'm going to put these links in the chat. I think, bear with us, y'all. We're continuing to learn Zoom and presentations, and I think that because I have the host stuff today, I think only I can add it out to everyone. So I'm going to do that.
Okay. And I would say along those lines, sometimes it's odd when inspiration strikes us. We don't know kind of what we're going to be watching or doing, or, you know, petting our dog, whatever. You know, maybe think about starting, say, a Google Doc or just a note, if you know, like on your phone or something, where you can think about those little snippets of potentially good ideas. You don't have to flesh it out right there, but then it'll be there when you actually sit down to do your writing.
And I think that the thing I would add is, we all get invited sometimes to do to a particular high school and do like a workshop where we'll get to read sort of a first draft of someone's application essay. And sometimes I read those and it's very clear to me what I'm supposed to take away from it. Mm. And sometimes I read them and it's the story that might even be enjoyable, but it's not really clear to me what the writer wanted me to learn about them or or what the message they were trying to convey was. And so I'll read it. I'll just, sit there and read it. And then I'll ask the student who wrote it, like, what do you want me to take away from this? And sometimes they didn't have a thing. This was a story they wanted to tell. And that can be okay, but I think it's better if it's clear, kind of, what did I learn about you that I didn't already know, or what have you shown me about yourself? What have you conveyed? And so if you write something and you read it yourself, and that's hard to do, but that's why a proofreader and a friend is helpful here. If it's not clear, if your message isn't clear to somebody else, then you probably need to spend a little more time with it.
Well, again, thank you. If you guys ever need help or have questions, of course, we have lots of other of these webinars that we will be hosting, covering other parts of the application process, other elements of Center College. We'd love to have you tune back. We will record this and post it as well. And in the meantime, we wish you a wonderful day, and we thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.